Yes.
My name is Will Marshall. I'm president of the Progressive Policy Institute, and I want to welcome you to today's forum on rethinking nuclear energy. Is atomic power a cure for climate change? At the beginning, let me first thank the wonderful folks at Johns Hopkins University for making this facility available to us, a little bigger than our usual conference room. Ben Ginsberg, Kathy Hill, Maria Mendez, and Rosa Kavanaugh, thank you very much for allowing us to bring our movable intellectual feast down to Dupont Circle. In the past couple of years, there's been a real sea change in public consciousness when it comes to the risks of climate change. It seems pretty evident. Even George Bush seems to have gotten religion up to a certain point. A threat that a decade ago seemed kind of vague and conjectural now appears to be in our face every day. And we know from the scientific community that we need to cut greenhouse gas emissions dramatically, 80% below 1990 levels, in order to stop doing damage to the Earth's atmosphere. And this daunting task has revived interest in nuclear energy. Because whatever the drawbacks, nuclear energy remains an efficient way to generate lots of power with zero pollution or greenhouse gas emissions, or very low carbon emissions. On top of that, we all know that U.S. electricity demand is only going to rise over the years 45% by 2030. And if you extrapolate from current trends, even allowing for modest expansion of nuclear energy's contribution to our power generation, you get a very perverse result, and that is that nuclear energy's share of power generation actually falls from about 19% of the total to 15% by 2030, while coal's share likely rises. And this means that we're going to be pumping a lot more carbon into the atmosphere unless we make some very heroic assumptions about efficiency gains, about the promise of renewables, or clean coal and the carbon sequestration technologies. And we also know that if we're going to take on the challenge of slowing down climate change, we're going to have to target the transportation sector, which is responsible for roughly a third of America's greenhouse gas emissions. Now, with oil over $100 a barrel, with America embroiled in two Middle Eastern wars, it's been brought home to the American people in a very acute way, the risk, the cost of our growing addiction on oil. And when we ask ourselves at PPI, what's the way to make the biggest dent in the shortest amount of time possible in American oil consumption, the most plausible answer that kept coming back to us, and we featured in one of the reports that you can get outside on the table there, is electric or hybrid electric vehicles, clean cars that allow us to shift a significant portion of our transportation energy demand to the grid. And this creates, we hope, a chance for America to pull a kind of energy policy double play in that we would be able to cut oil consumption dramatically and cut carbon emissions from cars and trucks. But of course, that's only true if we also move toward a much cleaner grid, much cleaner generation. In my own view, and I don't want to pretend to be perfectly neutral up here, I'm not, but in my own view, I think that all these facts and developments have shifted the burden of proof in the nuclear energy debate. Since about 1979, the 3 Mile Island incident, the presumption has lain against those who want to expand nuclear energy. And I think now the burden of proof really falls on those who oppose the expansion of nuclear power. And I think we're seeing that more and more in this debate. That's especially true as other countries rush to embrace more nuclear power. We know China's planning scores of new nuclear plants along with lots of coal-fired plants. I spent a lot of time in France. My wife is French, and I know that they enjoy relatively clean air, relatively cheap power, and because they reprocess, that certainly makes the waste disposal issues that we grapple with here somewhat easier to handle. And so I asked myself, why is it that Americans these days can't say we to nuclear power? And this is primarily a debate among environmentalists. I think the debate that really matters is among the environmental world. Because of lingering public concerns about safety, about waste disposal, about proliferation, the environmental community, which has built up a lot of credibility, rightfully, over the last generation, on the risk of these sorts of things, exercises a kind of veto on the dramatic expansion of nuclear power. And in deference, it's a same deference to the environmental community and its leaders on environmental issues that I think leads the Democratic candidates, for example, out there on the hustings to offer very, very tepid support for the expansion of nuclear power while being quite passionate and vehement in their opposition to opening up the Yucca Mountain Waste Repository. But now we've seen, over the last decade or so, the emergence of the pro-nuclear Greens, people with impeccable environmental credentials, including several of our panelists today, who are challenging the anti-nuclear taboo on the argument that climate change has changed the terms of debate. So I think it's a terribly important question. Can environmentalists reconcile their traditional doubts about nuclear power with the imperative of cutting greenhouse gas emissions? Because if that were to happen, if you were to see environmental leaders finding new ways to embrace a larger role for nuclear power, you'd certainly see a dramatic impact on public opinion. It would help underscore the urgency for dramatic action, including, I think, helping to get unstuck progress in Congress for passing a cap-and-trade bill or some legislation that would actually put a hard cap, a mandatory cap on carbon emissions. So we want to grapple today with these arguments, with the legitimate and formidable obstacles and objections that opponents of expanding nuclear power are going to raise. We're very happy to have some folks here who can do that authoritatively. And we want to really drill down on some of these difficult issues. One fault line in particular, I think, that will come up is in this debate is the choice, or the debate between the nuclear power and renewables. Just how much room is there for a dramatic expansion of renewable energy in terms of providing baseload electrical generation, and how quickly could that actually happen? I think is a big important question here. But one thing we probably all ought to agree on in this debate is that decisions ought to be based on sound science. I think progressives have rightly assailed the Bush administration over the years for its evident disdain for science, whether we're talking about creationism in the schools or stem cell research, or this administration's long denial of the effects of man-made climate change. And I think in this debate there is a lot of dubious science, a lot of misinformation swirling around, and we hope at least, if nothing else, to dispel some of that today. So without further ado, I want to introduce our distinguished panel in the order that they'll speak. I'm asking everybody to be as pithy as you can, 7 to 10 minutes, so we can then have plenty of time to throw this open for a wider-ranging discussion. First, let me start with Patrick Moore. Patrick Moore is a leader in the international environmental field for over 30 years. He's a co-founder of Greenpeace, served 9 years as president of Greenpeace Canada, 7 years as a director of Greenpeace International. He's now co-chair of the Clean and Safe Energy Coalition and director of Next Energy Solutions, which is the biggest distributor of geothermal systems in Canada. Gwyneth Cravens is an American novelist and journalist, and in addition to 5 novels, her fiction and nonfiction have appeared in The New Yorker, where she's also worked as a fiction editor, and in Harper's Magazine, where she is an associate editor. And she's written widely on a variety of subjects, including science. And her new book, which I'll hawk here a little bit, The Power to Save the World, The Truth About Nuclear Energy, is really a wonderfully written book that brings a novelist's eye to all of these, to the layers of mythology and misinformation that have grown up around the controversial subject of nuclear power over the last generation. Tom Cochran is a nuclear physicist and environmentalist. He's the director of the NRDC's nuclear program and holds the Wade Green Chair for Nuclear Policy. His work is focused mainly on matters related to nuclear weapons, fissile material control, and nuclear waste management. And finally, Christopher Flavin is president of WorldWatch Institute, and he's a leading voice on the potential for new energy options and strategies to replace fossil fuels, which would both increase energy security and avoid dangerous climate change. He's the author of 3 books on energy, including Power Surge, Guide to the Coming Energy Revolution, which anticipated many of the changes now underway in world energy markets. So we have a really distinguished panel, and I want to thank you all for coming out today to help us join these issues. And we'll start, Patrick, with you, and if you come on up and we'll take it from there.